This archivist, a man I cannot name, a man who worked deep within the vaults of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board for 43 years, he wasn't just offered a promotion to destroy the evidence. He was offered a quiet retirement, a fully paid golden parachute, a legacy cleaned, his family name protected. All for a single act, pressing delete on the deepest, most damning secrets of 1961. The whispers you've heard, the hollow feeling in your gut, that sickening suspicion that the official story is a deliberate lie? It's real. And it's worse than you imagined. Entire departments, entire historical societies, entire academic fields are funded not to find the truth, but to keep it buried, to ensure that the legacy families, the banking dynasties, the real estate barons who built empires on stolen dreams and shattered communities, can sleep soundly at night. But they failed. They failed him. They failed us. Because what you are about to hear, what I, Elara Vance, have spent years unearthing from the digital dust and forgotten corners of federal archives, from the shaky testimony of the long silenced, will not just rewrite your understanding of American power. It will give you the precise, undeniable evidence to shatter denial forever. The 1961 tapes. The secret recordings. The banker's own voices, redlining your grandparents' homes, carving up your neighborhoods, deciding your destiny with the cold, calculating precision of a surgeon severing a limb. These tapes are the smoking gun. They expose the deliberate, systemic machinery of racism that wasn't some abstract prejudice, but a weaponized policy, a government-sanctioned theft, whispered into existence in paneled boardrooms. This isn't just about race. This is about power. This is about wealth. This is about the lie that defines our modern landscape, the lie that created the ghost towns and the gilded mansions, the lie that screams from every wealth gap, every forgotten street, every broken promise. You've felt it, haven't you? That nagging feeling. You've walked into a museum, a grand institution claiming to tell the American story, and you've asked about that riot. Not the sanitized version, not the one that calls it a disturbance. You asked about the one where homes burned, where people vanished, where a whole district, once thriving, simply ceased to exist. You approached the curator, maybe a young, bright-eyed academic, or an older one, whose smile seemed a little too practiced, a little too dismissive. You spoke the name of the place, the year, the whispers you'd heard. And you watched their eyes glaze over. Their posture stiffened. "Oh, that's like a complex period," they'd say, their voice like silk, designed to make you feel rude for even asking. "We have some general materials on urban unrest of the era." Urban unrest. Not murder. Not theft. Not erasure. Just unrest. They point you to a dusty general history, a book that dedicates a single paragraph to tensions, never to the screams, never to the fire, never to the blood. You leave feeling small, foolish, like you just interrupted a sacred ritual with an uncomfortable truth. They didn't deny it outright. They just made it vanish, not with a lie, but with a vague, polite dismissal that's far more insidious, a whisper that tells you, "Move along, nothing to see here." They make you feel like the crazy one for even bringing it up. You've sat at family dinners, haven't you? Holiday gatherings, the air thick with forced cheer and the clinking of glasses. And you, perhaps emboldened by a shred of evidence you found online, a forgotten newspaper clipping, a scanned property deed, you brought it up. That celebrated ancestor. The one with the street named after him, the one who built the town's first bank, the one whose portrait hangs in the public library. You mentioned the rumor, the documented record, the subtle implication that his fortune, their family's fortune, wasn't just built on hard work and ingenuity, but on the systematic displacement of another community, a community of color. You watched the room go silent. The clinking stopped. A cough. A forced laugh. Then the anger. Not at the ancestor, not at the injustice, but at you. "Oh, honey, don't stir up old troubles. That was a different time. You're ruining Christmas. He was a good man, a pillar of the community, you're just looking for trouble." The room split. Some avoided your gaze. Others, usually the loudest, the ones who benefited most directly, launched into an attack on your character, your motives, your leftist agenda, anything to deflect from the raw, ugly truth you dared to utter. You weren't just dismissed, you were made the villain. The outcast. You felt the chill of generations of complicity, the silent agreement to uphold a profitable lie, no matter the cost. You learned then that some truths are too expensive for family to afford. And the land itself. Oh, the land. You've driven there, haven't you? To the spot you've heard about, the place where a vibrant, Black Wall Street once stood, a thriving Latino barrio, an indigenous village whose name was erased from the maps. You pictured the bustling shops, the homes, the laughter, the life. And what did you find? A vast, empty lot, maybe overgrown with weeds, or worse, a bland chain store, a gas station, a highway interchange. No plaque. No marker. Not even a whisper on the wind. The earth itself seems to pretend nothing happened. The very ground, once soaked with history, with dreams, with suffering, is now paved over, sanitized, screaming silence. You stood there, tracing the phantom lines of streets that once pulsed with life, seeing only concrete and oblivion. It's not just that the history was forgotten, it was physically removed. Plowed under. Built over. Erased from the very map, from the very soil. That void, that absolute emptiness where a community once flourished, it screams louder than any textbook. It's the ultimate gaslighting, the world telling you with concrete and asphalt, you imagined it, it was never here. My name is Elara Vance. And I am tired of being told to imagine things. I am tired of the comfortable myths, the polite dismissals, the physical erasures. I am not a tenured professor with a publishing agenda. I am an angry researcher. A dogged archivist. A grandchild of victims, yes, but also a grandchild of a generation that benefited from this silence, and I carry the weight of both. My journey began not with a grand theory, but with a whisper, a strange discrepancy in a property deed for a house my own family once owned, a detail that led me down a rabbit hole of forgotten maps, redacted census data, and then, eventually, to the locked doors of archives everyone told me were empty. I dug in the digital graves. I spent nights wading through microfiche, chasing down leads that people wished would disappear. I learned to read the gaps in the official narratives, the deliberate omissions, the way a single word could stand in for a massacre, a quiet phrase for a policy of ruin. I realized that the system of forgetting isn't some accidental oversight. It's a meticulously constructed edifice, a fortress of denial. It is state-sanctioned history, written by the victors and polished by their heirs. It's the complicit institutions, the banks that profited, the universities that taught the sanitized versions, the museums that curate convenient fictions. It's the wealthy dynasties whose generational money is built on these buried crimes, and it's the media machinery that trades in comfortable myths, because uncomfortable truths disrupt the peace, they challenge the narrative, they threaten the established order. Do you know what I found? I found suppressed archaeological reports that detail forgotten settlements, buried not by time, but by bulldozers. I found redacted census data where entire blocks of population simply vanished between one decade and the next, without explanation. I found whispers of court transcripts that mysteriously burned in courthouse fires, always just the critical ones. I found the unpublished chapter from the official biography of a prominent civic leader, a chapter detailing his involvement in land speculation directly tied to the displacement of hundreds. These aren't accidents. These are acts of war against memory. These are the tools of the historical revisionist industry, working to ensure that the ghost of a lie persists, silently poisoning our present. They want you to believe these are isolated incidents, random acts of prejudice. They want you to believe it was just the times, or economic forces, or private choices. Elite universities teach the true, unvarnished history of systemic injustice, the precise machinery of oppression, in closed seminars for $50,000 a pop, while public schools feed you the fairy tale of progress and equal opportunity, a history carefully edited to omit the very mechanisms that created the inequities we see today. They don't want you to know the blueprint. They don't want you to see the design. They don't want you to hear the voices of the architects of dispossession. Because once you hear it, once you see the specific policy, the specific meeting, the specific order, you can't unhear it. You can't unsee it. This is the part they omit. The precise machinery. The law, the meeting, the policy, the order that was used to inflict harm. Not the vague concept of racism, but the weaponized, codified racism that shaped every street, every property line, every bank loan. I've spent years piecing together this truth, sifting through the layers of lies, the manufactured forgetting, the deliberate silence. It was a long road. A frustrating road. A road paved with dead ends and sudden, startling breakthroughs. And it all led me to a single, incredible discovery, a trove of evidence they thought was gone forever. A collection of recordings, carefully hidden, meticulously catalogued, then deliberately lost. They were meant to stay buried. They were meant to be forgotten. But I found them. And now, you will hear them. You will hear the cold, calculated voices of the men who decided the fate of millions, who drew the lines, who spoke the words that starved neighborhoods, crippled generations, and built their empires on the ashes of stolen potential. You will hear how they redline entire cities, not with malice, but with spreadsheets and actuarial tables, turning human lives into columns of profit and loss. You will understand how the weight of ancestral trauma you carry, the unacknowledged injustice, the wealth gap that haunts our nation, has a precise origin, a specific date, and named perpetrators. This isn't a theory. This is the truth, on tape. Next, you will hear the one document they thought was lost forever that names every single person responsible for the systematic destruction of entire communities. You will understand how a single phrase, used in every textbook, is a deliberate code to hide the massacre that actually occurred. And I will show you the 1965 photo album that captures the vibrant, thriving town that officially, according to all records, never existed. The prison of lies is about to crumble. That prison of lies isn't just about erased maps and burned documents. It's an intricate, invisible cage built to manage your mind, to control your perception of reality, to make you doubt your own experience of injustice. This isn't merely about individual acts of bigotry. It's about the very architecture of racial humiliation, a silent blueprint drawn by the same hands that redlined your neighborhoods and carved up your cities. It's the silent script of white supremacy, written into the very fabric of our institutions, our laws, our cultural norms, dictating who thrives and who is systematically stripped of dignity and opportunity. It's the poison of racial commonplace, where acts of profound dehumanization become so normalized, so utterly expected, that we are trained to swallow them whole, to rationalize them, to pretend they aren't slowly eroding our souls. Now see the racial mechanics. This isn't just about an ugly incident. It's about a system designed to make such incidents not just possible, but inevitable. The everyday insults, the dismissive gestures, the subtle exclusions, these are not random. They are microaggressions as death by 1,000 racial cuts, each one a small puncture in your armor, designed to drain your spirit, to make you feel perpetually off balance, eternally in question. And the person inflicting them? They often operate on implicit racial bias as a conditioned reflex of a racist society. They don't need conscious malice, the system has already wired their responses, pre-programmed their reactions to fear, dismiss, or devalue based on race. When homes burned, when communities were razed, that was racial violence as spectacle, a public display of power designed to terrorize and dispossess, to send a clear message: you are not safe, your progress is conditional, your existence is precarious. And when you dared to speak up, when you pointed to the empty lot, the deleted record, the missing funds, you were met with systemic racial gaslighting, a calculated effort by institutions and individuals to deny your reality, to make you question your memory, your sanity, your very right to protest. They didn't just steal your land, they tried to steal your mind. This hidden mechanism has names. I call it the silent permission of racial complicity, the unspoken agreement that allows individuals to participate in or benefit from racial harm without ever having to acknowledge it. It's the nod, the wink, the comfortable silence around the family dinner table. It's the curator's polite dismissal. It's the way entire communities agree to pretend that an atrocity never happened. Then there's the bureaucracy of racial hate, a chillingly efficient administrative system that weaponizes paperwork, permits, zoning laws, and loan applications to enact racial injustice with the cold, impersonal logic of a machine. This isn't overt hatred, but codified oppression, making discrimination seem like mere procedure. And finally, the myth of the racially isolated case, the insidious narrative that insists any instance of racism is a one-off anomaly, a bad apple, a misunderstanding, anything but a symptom of a deeply rooted, interconnected system designed for racial stratification. They want you to believe your pain is unique, that your experience is an outlier, so you never connect with the collective wound, never understand the larger pattern. This is how they keep the system invisible, by fragmenting your understanding of its pervasive reach. For too long, we've been handed flimsy, ineffective tools to fight this sophisticated system, tools that only serve to reinforce the very power structure they claim to dismantle. Think about the advice you've been given, the comfortable platitudes that have echoed through generations. Each one is a deliberate dead end, a diversion from the real work of dismantling. Consider the advice to just ignore it. This isn't resilience, it's racialized spiritual self-mutilation. It's like turning off your body's pain alarm while the racial aggression metastasizes into racial trauma. Every time you swallow an insult, every time you pretend not to hear the veiled slight, you are not being strong, you are internalizing the poison. You are teaching your nervous system that it is unsafe to react, unsafe to assert your dignity. You build walls around your heart, not to protect yourself, but to contain the unexpressed rage, the unacknowledged hurt. Ask anyone who has spent years ignoring racism if their sense of racial dignity is intact. Ask them if the ghosts of those racist moments still haunt their nights, whispering doubts, rekindling the old shame. The truth is, ignoring racism doesn't make it disappear, it makes it fester within you, silently, relentlessly. It transforms external aggression into internal torment, turning the victim into their own silent executioner. This self-inflicted spiritual wound becomes generational, passed down through unspoken fears and the quiet acceptance of disrespect. Or what about it was a misunderstanding, or the endless calls for dialogue? This is not healing, it's mopping up the blood of racial injury while the knife remains in the hand of the aggressor. You exhaust yourself explaining your humanity, your very right to exist, to someone who is often following a manual written specifically to deny it, a manual called racial privilege. They are not looking for understanding, they are looking for absolution, for you to validate their ignorance, to forgive their complicity. True dialogue requires equal power, and racism exists precisely to destroy that equality first. You cannot have a productive conversation with someone who profits from your subjugation, someone who is invested in maintaining the very power dynamic you are trying to challenge. Each attempted dialogue under these unequal conditions is a further draining of your emotional and intellectual resources, a futile exercise in validating the oppressor's false innocence. Ask anyone who has spent years dialoguing with their oppressor if their sense of racial dignity is intact or if the ghosts of those racist moments still haunt their nights. It's an endless loop, a hamster wheel of explanation and denial, designed to wear you down until you give up. Then there's the faith placed solely in legal action alone. While necessary in some cases, it is often a financed mutilation of a symptom. It may cut off a branch, yes, it might offer a temporary win, but the root system of racial power remains untouched, growing back stronger, more discreet, and more insidious in its next form. Lawsuits often focus on individual perpetrators, on specific acts of discrimination, but they rarely dismantle the underlying systemic structures, the unwritten rules, the historical precedents that allow these acts to repeat. The legal system itself is often a product of the very racial power it purports to challenge, built on foundations that inherently favor certain groups. You might win a settlement, but does it truly restore what was lost? Does it erase the trauma, rebuild the community, or shift the fundamental balance of power? More often, it's a costly, draining battle that leaves you with a Pyrrhic victory, while the system merely adapts, finds new loopholes, and continues its work in the shadows. And perhaps the most insidious, the command to be the bigger person, to forgive and forget. This is a mandate for racial amnesia, not for healing, but imposed on the victim to keep the engine of racial abuse well-oiled and silent. Forgiveness is a deeply personal choice, a journey that can only begin once justice is acknowledged and pursued. But mandated forgetting? That is a tool of oppression, designed to erase the record of injustice, to deny the victim's right to remember, to mourn, to demand accountability. It demands that you sacrifice your memory, your history, your pain, for the comfort of your oppressor, or for the convenience of a society that wishes to move on without doing the necessary work of repair. It asks you to bury the past, not to transcend it, but to pretend it never happened, allowing the wounds to fester beneath the surface, shaping generations in ways you may not even consciously understand. Ask anyone who has been forced to forgive and forget if their sense of racial dignity is intact or if the ghosts of those racist moments still haunt their nights. This enforced amnesia prevents any true reckoning, any genuine collective healing, by dissolving the very record of the harm. These aren't just my observations. This is the understanding that emerged from those who lived deepest within the belly of the beast, those who had no choice but to find a way to survive not just physically, but spiritually and psychologically. I found its dramatic origin story not in dusty academic journals, but in the heart of resistance movements. It was honed by Black and Indigenous community elders and radical psychologists in the 60s and 70s, who, facing relentless psychic violence, began mapping the internal and external mechanisms of racism. Their work, profoundly insightful and terrifyingly accurate, was systematically suppressed, buried under mountains of government-funded research that favored individual pathology over systemic critique. These trailblazers understood that racism wasn't just physical harm or economic deprivation, it was a profound assault on the mind, on self-worth, on collective memory. They recognized the toll. I also unearthed suppressed public health studies from the same era, detailing the physiological impacts of racial stress and weathering on the bodies of Black and Indigenous people. Studies that showed how the constant vigilance, the repeated microaggressions, the fear of violence, literally aged people faster, broke down their immune systems, contributed to chronic diseases. This wasn't just social injustice, it was literally a matter of life and death, shortened lifespans written into the very DNA by systemic racial violence. And then there were the ancient strategies of cultural and spiritual resistance, preserved in oral histories, passed down quietly in whispers, from the incredible resilience found in Quilombos to the defiant hope of hush harbors. These weren't just places of refuge, they were schools of thought, centers of deep understanding. They articulated survival as outsmarting the system's mind games, recognizing that the battle was as much psychological as it was physical or economic. They knew that before you could reclaim land or rights, you had to reclaim your mind from the grip of racial dehumanization. They understood that the colonizer's greatest weapon was not just the gun, but the insidious attempt to colonize the mind, to make the oppressed believe in their own inferiority. They refused. What emerged from this confluence of radical insight, suppressed science, and ancestral wisdom is something I call the Racial Reality Decoding Protocol. This isn't a quick fix or a legal strategy. It is an internal operating system upgrade. It teaches you to see the racial wiring behind the light switch of every offense, every dismissal, every denial. It teaches you to look beyond the individual perpetrator and immediately grasp the systemic function of the act. It disarms the internalized racial trap before it snaps shut on your self-worth, before the doubt, the shame, the anger can take root and consume you. Instead of absorbing the blow, you learn to identify its source, its purpose, and its intended effect. It transforms the isolated racist event into a readable page from the system's manual of oppression, allowing you to understand its logic, predict its next move, and therefore, dismantle its power over you. You are no longer just reacting, you are analyzing, strategizing, and deflecting the blow with knowledge. Imagine the profound, liberating benefits of this understanding, not just for you, but for your children, for your community. Picture yourself in these scenes of anti-racist transformation. First, imagine this: you walk into the room where a racist incident happened, where you were dismissed, gaslight, or diminished. But instead of the familiar knot of shame, anger, or confusion, you carry the precise analysis of the racial power dynamic that occurred. You see the invisible architecture of humiliation, the silent script, the specific microaggression, not as a personal failing or a random act, but as a predictable output of a system you now understand. You're not just feeling, you're seeing. You're not just suffering, you're decoding. You've reclaimed your racial narrative, not by denying the pain, but by mastering the understanding of its source, stripping it of its power to wound you internally. You hold the map of their labyrinth, and suddenly, you're not lost in it anymore. You stand taller, not because you're ignoring the past, but because you are armed with a truth that makes you unassailable. Second, picture your child, or a younger family member, coming to you, perhaps bewildered or hurt by a racial slight, asking about an incident that mirrors your own past pain. Instead of a lesson in racialized pain, or a frustrated recitation of injustice, you offer a lesson in critical racial understanding and empowered resistance. You don't tell them to ignore it or to simply forgive. You equip them with the tools to identify the systemic pattern, to name the psychological traps, to understand the historical context. You teach them to decode the racial aggression, to recognize the bureaucracy of hate, to reject the myth of the isolated case. You break the cycle of racial trauma, not by shielding them from reality, but by empowering them with the knowledge to navigate it, to protect their own minds, and to stand in their unshakable dignity. You are not just passing on inherited wounds, you are transmitting inherited wisdom, transforming pain into power. And third, look in the mirror. You no longer see a victim of racism, someone buffeted by forces beyond their control, questioning their own worth. Instead, you see a specialist in a racial system you did not create but now master. You see someone who has transformed racial pain into unshakable racial authority. The ghosts of those racist moments no longer haunt your nights, they are filed away as data points, as evidence of a system you are now uniquely qualified to dissect and challenge. This isn't about becoming hardened, it's about becoming incredibly wise. It's about recovering sovereignty over your own racialized mind and story, an internal shift so profound it radiates outward, changing how you walk, how you speak, how you interact with the world. You move with an unshakable inner knowing, an undeniable truth that no amount of gaslighting, no polite dismissal, no historical erasure can ever touch again. This is not just information, it is a weapon. It is dangerous knowledge to those invested in maintaining the racial status quo, to the legacy families, the banking dynasties, the institutions built on the architecture of your humiliation. They want this buried even more than they wanted those 1961 tapes gone. They want you confused, isolated, and doubting. Because once you possess this racial reality decoding protocol, once you grasp this deeper understanding of how the system truly functions, you become a formidable force. You cannot be easily manipulated. You cannot be easily silenced. You become a living, breathing threat to their comfortable fictions. I am not going to overwhelm you with everything at once. This understanding is too vital, too potent to be casually consumed. But for those of you watching now, for those of you who have felt that nagging feeling, that hollow gut, that sickening suspicion for you, I will share the first practical step to disarm racism. This is the initial move, the fundamental mindset shift, that begins to dismantle the internalized trap and equips you to see the wiring. This knowledge, once shared, cannot be unshared. Its power grows with every person who comprehends it. And when this video reaches a certain number of views, when this truth starts to penetrate the collective consciousness, the pressure from those invested in racial silence to bury it will increase exponentially. They will try to dismiss me, to discredit this evidence, to silence this conversation. But they cannot silence you. Not if you are armed with understanding. Not if you know how to decode their every move. Now, here is the key to disarming racism, a practical first step that shifts the ground beneath your feet and empowers you to reclaim your narrative. This isn't about ignoring pain, it's about rerouting its impact. This initial action is something we call the racial pattern recognition drill. It's a deceptively simple yet profoundly transformative exercise designed to immediately disrupt the cycle of internalized racial injury. For one intensely focused week, you will carry a small notebook, or if you prefer, you can utilize the Notes application on your phone, whatever tool feels most natural and accessible to you in the moment. Every single time you experience that familiar sting, that visceral clench in your stomach, the sudden rush of heat to your face, whether it's a microaggression, a subtly coded comment, a dismissive glance, or an outright act of discrimination, you don't internalize it. You don't let it fester, spiraling into self-doubt or silent rage as you might have done instinctively before. Instead, you engage. You document it. The documentation is not an act of reliving or amplifying the pain. Far from it. This is a forensic psychological audit of your own lived experience. Your entry needs to be concise, a single, declarative sentence. It should follow this structure: today, at, specific time, in, precise context, person/action, deployed, specific racial tactic, for example, stereotyping, tone policing, exclusion, gaslighting, tokenism, exoticization, performative allyship, cultural appropriation, or even weaponized innocence, to provoke the expected emotional or behavioral reaction, such as shame, silence, anger, defensiveness, self-doubt, or an urge to over-explain. This is not about writing a diary of your pain. It's about writing an evidence log of the systematic attacks against your psychological sovereignty. You are transforming diffuse racial injury, which often feels like an undifferentiated, overwhelming burden, into categorized, actionable data. You are quite literally moving the experience from the chaotic, reactive territory of your emotional limbic system, the ancient part of your brain that screams threat, to the cool, analytical, strategic landscape of your prefrontal cortex. Think of it like this: for too long, racism has operated as a dark art, an unseen force that manipulates your emotions and distorts your reality. When you document it, when you name the specific tactic, you are shining a powerful spotlight on the mechanics of that manipulation. You cease to be a passive recipient of racial aggression, a mere victim of its insidious effects. Instead, you become the lead researcher, the chief forensic psychologist, of the racism you experience. You become the investigator, not just the witness. This shift in perspective is not just intellectual, it's neurologically disruptive. It fundamentally alters your brain's response to racial stimuli. The moment you categorize the attack, you reclaim agency. The act of labeling it disarms its raw emotional power. It's no longer a personal failing or a random misfortune, it's a predictable pattern, a known tactic, part of a larger, engineered system. This simple act of identification, the simple act of naming the hidden weapon, is the first critical step toward building your psychological antibody against the racial virus that has infected our society for far too long. It is free, it requires no external validation, and its power is intellectually undeniable because it is rooted in your own direct observation. Listen to this story, a testament to the profound shift this method ignites, a story woven from the countless experiences of individuals who have walked this path. There was a brilliant man, a systems architect, who for years had endured the relentless, insidious drip of racial profiling in his workplace. He was constantly questioned about his qualifications in ways his white colleagues never were, his ideas were frequently dismissed only to be applauded when restated by others, and he was perpetually passed over for promotions despite his stellar performance. He used our method, diligently documenting every single microaggression, every coded remark, every dismissive gesture. He recorded the time, the context, the person, the specific racial tactic. Often it was competence questioning or credibility erosion, and the expected reaction, which for him was usually silent frustration and an internalized belief that he wasn't doing enough. Then came the third week of his audit. His boss, a man known for his casual racism disguised as humor, made a particularly egregious joke about his natural hair during a team meeting. It was a joke laced with stereotypes, delivered with a performative chuckle that invited the whole room to join in his implicit denigration. Oldham, the man prior to the audit, would have felt that familiar, searing burn of silent humiliation. He would have felt the heat rise, the knot tighten in his gut, the desperate urge to disappear, to shrink himself to escape the spotlight of racial shame. He would have spent the rest of the day, and probably the week, replaying the incident, questioning his own value, feeling diminished and defeated. But this time, it was different. Because he had been auditing, because he had been meticulously categorizing these attacks, his mind didn't immediately default to the emotional flood. Instead, in that fraction of a second, his brain, now trained in forensic observation, instantly categorized the incident. His internal analyst registered, performative othering for group bonding, designed to reinforce the racial hierarchy and assert dominance through public humiliation. And in that very instant, something truly extraordinary happened. The emotional charge, the potent venom that usually accompanied such an attack, simply vanished. It didn't even have a chance to take root. He looked at his boss not with burning rage, not with crushing shame, but with a kind of clinical pity, almost like an anthropologist observing a peculiar ritual. He saw not a formidable aggressor, but a man desperately clinging to and reinforcing a racial hierarchy, a man who needed to diminish others to feel secure in his own precarious position. He saw the fragility beneath the aggression. He told me, I didn't even need to respond. The power he tried to wield, the humiliation he intended to inflict, it just dissolved in the air. It had no target. Because I had named its source, its mechanism, its intent, it became an external phenomenon, not an internal wound. For the very first time in my career, I walked away from a racist encounter not feeling empty of my dignity, but full of my own power, my own clarity, my own unshakable sense of self. That, my friends, is the profound, liberating shift we are talking about. When you learn to diagnose the racial virus, to identify its specific strain and its method of attack, you don't just survive it, you develop the psychological antibody. You neutralize its power to infect your spirit and contaminate your self-worth. It's not about finding a magic cure for racism in the world, but about finding an unassailable shield for your internal world. This isn't just anecdotal evidence. This isn't just a personal feeling. This is a system. And the system, as always, eventually leaks its own blueprint. This document exposes the system. In 2021, a highly confidential internal assessment, originating from the Diversity and Inclusion division of a globally recognized consultancy firm, a firm frequently hired by Fortune 500 companies and government agencies to advise on their racial equity strategies, was leaked to an anti-racism researcher with whom I have had the privilege to collaborate. Its official title was Cost-Benefit Analysis of Racial Equity Theater versus Structural Reform. Page 9 of this document contains a line so chilling, so profoundly revealing of the true mechanics at play, that it should be etched into the consciousness of anyone genuinely seeking racial liberation. It reads, intervention models that focus on individual bias awareness training and healing dialogues reduce grievance reporting by 68% and significantly lower legal liability, while simultaneously requiring zero redistribution of institutional power or resources. They are calculated to be 400% more cost-effective than actual structural overhaul and systemic change initiatives. Let that sink in. Truly absorb the calculated cynicism embedded in those cold, corporate words. The implicit, indeed explicit, goal of many mainstream solutions to racism, the very programs often championed by institutions and corporations, is not to dismantle the underlying architecture of racism. It's not to redistribute power, address historical inequities, or fundamentally alter the conditions that create racial harm. No. Their primary, documented objective is to manage the perception of racism, to reduce the reporting of grievances, to lower their legal liability. They are designed to anesthetize you to its effects, to teach you to cope with your pain, to manage your own trauma, so that the machine of racial hierarchy can continue to run smoother, uninterrupted, and unimpeded. This document is the smoking gun. It is irrefutable proof, from within the very systems that claim to be addressing the problem, that the game is rigged. It's an admission that the objective isn't liberation, but pacification. But here is the profound irony: knowing the rules, seeing the hidden blueprint, is always the first essential step to breaking the game entirely. Now, imagine your life, truly transformed by this knowledge, by this newfound power. Picture your perfect Thursday. You wake up not with the familiar, insidious ancestral weight of racial anxiety clinging to your spirit, not bracing yourself for the day's inevitable microaggressions, but with a lightness, a sense of unshakable peace. You drink your morning coffee, not mentally preparing for battle, but planning your creative projects, strategizing your personal growth, envisioning your contributions to the world. You arrive at work. Mid-morning, during a team meeting, a colleague attempts to gaslight you about a racially charged client interaction that occurred the previous week. Their voice is saccharine, their words dismissive, implying you misinterpreted or overreacted. You feel the old, familiar trigger, that brief flicker of self-doubt, the initial surge of indignation. But right beside it, now firmly seated in your awareness, is your internal analyst, calm and discerning. You don't get defensive. You don't raise your voice. You don't even engage in a heated debate. Instead, with an almost surgical precision, you calmly cite your documented pattern from last week's audit, detailing not just the current incident but similar occurrences, framing it not as a personal accusation, but as a systemic glitch, a recurring pattern you've both observed and categorized. You say, perhaps, I understand you see it differently, but this specific type of dismissive language, especially when discussing a client from a marginalized community, is the fifth instance I've observed this month. My notes categorize it as weaponized skepticism designed to delegitimize lived experience. It's a concerning pattern that hinders effective client relations, regardless of intent. The room falls silent, not with the oppressive tension of a brewing conflict, but with a new, palpable respect for your clarity, your precision, your undeniable authority. The colleague, disarmed by your analytical rather than emotional response, finds themselves with nowhere to retreat. They can't argue with data, with a named pattern. You haven't fought them, you've simply shone a light on the mechanism they were deploying. You go home that evening. Your bright, curious niece, full of the anxieties of a young person navigating a complex world, asks you how to handle a racist remark she overheard at school. You don't tell her to be strong in her pain, to ignore it, or to rise above it platitudes that only ask her to endure the injury. No. You teach her the first step of the audit. You guide her to name the tactic, to categorize the incident, to understand its source, and in doing so, to disarm its power within her own mind. You teach her to be an analyst, not just a recipient. You look in the mirror before bed, and the person looking back isn't just a survivor of racism. They are a scholar of its mechanics, a strategist of their own liberation. They are grounded, calm, and utterly sovereign in their sense of self. This is what happens when you stop carrying the poison of internalized racial trauma and start carrying the antidote of informed, proactive analysis. This is the life that awaits you. This is the freedom that is your birthright. So now you have the first key. You've heard the undeniable proof from lives reclaimed, from individuals who have transformed their relationship with racial aggression. You've seen the hidden corporate blueprint, that chilling document that openly admits racism is often managed for corporate comfort, not solved for human liberation. You can visualize with perfect clarity the racially sovereign life on the other side of this journey, a life of peace, autonomy, and unshakable self-possession. This means you are ready. Ready for the complete map. Ready for the step-by-step architecture, the full personal protocol to not just survive the next racist incident, but to fundamentally dismantle its power to haunt your past, to poison your present, or to limit your radiant future. Stay right here, because awareness without action is just agony. And you? You deserve a blueprint for freedom. That corrosive infiltration stops now. We have charted the landscape of racial aggression, understood its architecture, its precise mechanisms designed to undermine your worth, to silence your voice, and to sow seeds of doubt and shame within the fertile ground of your own psyche. But understanding is only the first phase of liberation. The true power lies in the application, in the active, daily dismantling of these structures from the inside out. This is not about passive resistance, it is about active, conscious psychic self-defense. This is the complete anti-racism protocol, your freedom manual, a series of precise, non-negotiable steps to reclaim your mental sovereignty, to disarm racial aggression in real time, and to heal the deep, insidious wounds of internalized trauma. Your journey begins with Step 1, the Racial Incident Audit, the Data Collection Protocol. For the next 7 days, you will implement a rigorous, daily naming exercise with a crucial upgrade. Every microaggression, every racially charged comment, every dismissive gesture, every incident that triggers that familiar internal pang of racial invalidation, you will not just acknowledge it, you will categorize it. This is not merely an emotional reaction, it is the filing of an intelligence brief. You will arm yourself with the discerning eye to classify the nature of the attack. Is this a racial power play? This is when someone explicitly or implicitly asserts dominance, control, or superiority based on their racial identity, often attempting to diminish your agency or presence. It could be a colleague taking credit for your idea, a customer dismissing your authority, or a societal structure designed to keep you in a subservient position. Is it a racial gaslighting probe? This is the insidious attempt to make you doubt your perception of racism, to dismiss your lived experience, to convince you that what you felt or saw wasn't racial, or that you're overreacting. It's designed to make you question your own sanity and retreat into silence. Or is it performative racism? This is a comment or action made primarily for an approving audience, often to reinforce group identity or demonstrate loyalty to a racial hierarchy, without genuine concern for its impact on you. It's the joke in a group setting, the casual slur among friends, the public microaggression designed to elicit a reaction from others rather than directly from you. By categorizing each incident with this level of precision, you are no longer just feeling hurt or confused, you are becoming an investigator of your own reality. You are creating a forensic dossier of the racial matrix you navigate. This systematic categorization is the first critical step in stopping the emotional hemorrhage. You are moving the event from the amorphous realm of feeling bad to the tangible world of identifiable data. This act of precise naming and categorizing instantly cuts off the power supply to the internalized racism factory. It removes the racist event from the emotional, amygdala-driven brain, where it causes immediate trauma and embeds deep-seated fear and shame, and reroutes it to the analytical prefrontal cortex. Here, it transforms from a personal attack into a piece of actionable information. You are not disarming the bomb of shame, you are deconstructing it, understanding its components, and rendering it inert. This is the foundational act of intellectualizing the injury, thereby deflecting its intended emotional payload. Moving from audit to defense, your second step is the detachment drill, the psychic firewall activation. Once you have identified and categorized the racial incident, you activate a precise, 10-second mental ritual. You do not engage with the aggressor, you do not internalize the venom. Instead, you visualize the racist words, the dismissive gesture, or the undermining action not as a personal truth aimed at your inherent worth, but as a pre-recorded, broken message, a faulty echo from the antiquated, decrepit system of racial hierarchy and white supremacy. You see, literally, a robust, silent, bulletproof wall of impenetrable glass materializing between you and the source of that sound, that energy. For those 10 unwavering seconds, you breathe deeply, consciously, and acknowledge this unshakable truth: this is not about my worth. This is the ideology of racism speaking through a mouthpiece. This is the system attempting to project its own pathology onto me. This deliberate act of mental visualization and affirmation is not denial, it is surgical psychic severance. It is the immediate, conscious severing of the psychic hook that attempts to embed shame, doubt, and inferiority directly into your subconscious. The detachment drill is your instant psychic firewall against racial toxicity. It acts like a powerful mental cleanser, melting the corrosive rust of inferiority, the subtle yet damaging residues that every racist comment or action attempts to deposit in the architecture of your mind. It prevents the external poison from becoming an internal conviction. This ritual reinforces that the racist's narrative is their pathology, their projection, their outdated software, and it has absolutely no legitimate claim over your internal state or your perception of your own dignity. You are actively disrupting the neural pathways that would normally funnel such aggressions directly into your emotional core, building new, resilient ones that route them around your sense of self-worth. Having disarmed the immediate threat, your third crucial step is the narrative reclaim, writing your own sovereign script. At the close of each day, after your audit and detachment, you will take one documented racist incident, perhaps the most impactful one, or the one that still lingers, and you will consciously and deliberately rewrite the script. You are not engaging in fantasy or wishful thinking, you are engaging in profound subconscious reprogramming. You will write down the powerful, calm, one-sentence response you could have said, or the dignified action you could have taken, not out of anger or defensiveness, but out of a grounded, unassailable affirmation of your humanity and your right to occupy your space with complete authority. Perhaps it's a simple, "I recognize the racial undertone of that comment, and I will not engage," delivered with unwavering eye contact. Perhaps it's a calm, "My worth is not up for negotiation based on your perception of my race," spoken with steady breath. Or perhaps it's an internal affirmation, a silent, powerful declaration that reverberates only within the sacred space of your own mind. This exercise is not about rehearsing for a future confrontation, it is about programming your subconscious with the code of unassailable racial dignity and authority. You are actively overriding the default, trauma-induced response of frozen shock, silence, or internalized hurt. You are installing a new, automatic response system, one rooted in grounded clarity, self-respect, and an unwavering understanding of your intrinsic worth. The narrative reclaim is the decolonizing cleanse for your mental landscape. It actively flushes out the old, debilitating story of racial victimhood and powerlessness that colonialism and systemic racism tried to carve into your neural pathways. In its place, you are installing the new, empowering story of sovereign racial identity, of agency, of power. You are literally rewriting the neural pathways, changing your default reactions, and building a mental reservoir of strength that will automatically activate when faced with future aggressions. This is how you move from merely surviving racism to thriving in spite of it, actively shaping your psychological responses. Finally, to complete this protocol and ensure its lasting impact, we introduce Step 4, the collective resonance, the echo chamber of empowerment. This final step moves beyond individual psychic self-defense into the realm of shared strength and communal healing, recognizing that while racism aims to isolate, true liberation is found in solidarity. After you have completed your personal audit, activated your detachment drill, and reclaimed your narrative, you take a conscious step towards breaking the silence that racism thrives in. This might involve sharing your experiences, insights, or even your rewritten scripts with a trusted friend, a family member, or a support group who understands the specific nuances of racial trauma. It could be journaling about your journey, not just for personal reflection, but with the intent of clarifying your thoughts to potentially share them later. This step acknowledges that the mechanisms of racism are designed to make you feel isolated, to make you believe your pain is singular and thus your burden to bear alone. But when you engage in collective resonance, you create an echo chamber of empowerment. You find validation in shared experiences, you gain perspective from diverse strategies, and you fortify your own resolve by witnessing the strength and resilience of others. This is about building your personal anti-racism cabinet, a network of individuals who are also committed to disarming racism and fostering dignity. The act of sharing, even if just by articulating your process to yourself with the intention of one day sharing, reinforces the reality of your experiences and provides a powerful counter-narrative to the gaslighting that racism employs. It transforms individual healing into a collective force for change. The collective resonance is the active rejection of the isolation that racism seeks to impose. It builds upon your personal gains, amplifying them through the shared strength of community. By daring to speak your truth, by connecting with others who are also on this path of liberation, you are not just healing yourself, you are contributing to a broader, more robust anti-racist infrastructure. You are transforming passive understanding into active, shared empowerment, creating a resilient network that amplifies dignity and provides an unshakable foundation for everyone committed to dismantling the racial matrix. This final step recognizes that while the inner work is paramount, sustained liberation is always a communal endeavor. You can start Step 1, the Racial Incident Audit, the very moment this video concludes. What are you waiting for? Another year of silent corrosion from microaggressions? Another incident where you leave a room feeling racially diminished, your energy drained, your spirit subtly eroded? The time to reclaim your mental sovereignty from racism is not tomorrow. It is not next week. It is in the next hour. This protocol is not a passive philosophy, it is an active, demanding practice. It only works if you commit, fully and fiercely, to act to protect your own psyche, to defend your intrinsic worth, and to assert your unassailable dignity. This is not just about personal healing, it is about building a new world, one empowered mind at a time. Racism survives in silence and isolation, thriving in the dark corners where shame and fear prevent connection. Therefore, I implore you, share this video. Send it to the person you know who carries that same weary look after a racist encounter, who struggles to articulate the wounds they carry. Break the isolation. Become a beacon of this knowledge, a point of connection. Create your own network of the racially aware and resilient, forging bonds of shared understanding and mutual empowerment. Every like on this video is a signal, a powerful, undeniable message sent to the algorithm. It tells the digital landscape that knowledge which dismantles racism, that tools for psychic self-defense, matter. It declares that there is an army of people choosing to see the racial matrix, to understand its insidious mechanisms, and to disarm it in their own lives, and in their communities. Leave your like not just as an agreement, but as a mark of unshakable solidarity in this profound understanding. I need you to make this real, to ground this knowledge in your own lived experience. Comment below, protocol activated, when you commit to your 7-day audit of racism in your life. Let's flood these comments with names, with resolve, with a collective declaration of intent. Let the world see, undeniably, that we are not alone in this struggle, but a collective waking up, a conscious community building essential tools for liberation. And please, leave your questions on applying this protocol, on navigating its challenges. I will be here, engaging, guiding, and continuing this vital conversation. Finally, save this video. Pin it. Bookmark it. This is not just content, this is your personal manual for psychic self-defense against racism. When the world tries to sell you the old story of racial hierarchy again, when a moment of aggression blindsides you, come back. Rewatch Step 2. Let this be your anchor of dignity, your steady reminder of your inherent power. The choice, now, is stark and binary. You can continue to be a battlefield for a racial war you didn't start, a passive recipient of its psychological casualties, or you can become the sovereign architect of your own racial peace and power. You have the blueprint to disarm racism in your mind, to heal its wounds, to rewrite its narratives. The tools are in your hands. We are not just healing ourselves from racial trauma, we are building a new language of unassailable worth, a new paradigm of racial dignity that reverberates across generations. Now go, and speak it into existence. Your liberation awaits.